All right, everybody, welcome to Strength of Knowledge podcast. I'm Marshall Bennett. Today, we are going to talk about when do you know to move on to more complex movements with your athletes. And then at the end of this, we're going to have a little special segment. So keep an eye out for that one. And then please keep your comments and thoughts coming towards our YouTube channel, Instagram, and Twitter. To start us off, like always, let's hit it. Aaron Latinsky.
That's if you don't mess up the segment again. So that might not happen. We'll find it out.
We'll find it out.
Yes, it's. I've been watching a lot of Trail Park Boys, so sorry. I'll lay one on you, lady. I picked it back up.
You want some jalapeno chips?
I picked it back up because I started it when I was in Iowa. No, was I in Iowa? But I started it when I was, I think, Iowa or SIU. And I got to like season 10, and I've been finishing up the last seasons. Now getting to the animated series because RIP Leahy. But back to the complex. How do I know? Really, that just depends. I mean, coming into high school, I started on very basic. Luckily, when I got in there, they had a decent base from the previous guy. Seemed like they were able to squat low and they were able to bench, able to do a lot of stuff really well. So I kind of got into a pretty good situation when I got to the high school. I started off very basic of front squats, bench, rows, teach them how to hinge. Then I teach the movement. I have the expectations. I want the full range of motion, whatever that movement is. First, teach them that movement. Then we excel at the movement. Then I'll load that movement. And I'm trying to think who I stole this off of. I can't remember where it was, but the first week of that new movement, it's always going to look like crap. That second week should look a little better. That third week, you should be like, okay, not that bad. Especially with different movements and how complex or just progressing them into a new movement, it's always going to be kind of funky. It's always going to be like, that first week, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the world's worst coach because it all just looks like trash. But having that mindset of knowing, hey, next week will be a little better. Third week will be a little better. Next week, it's just going to keep getting better. And I'm just going to keep coaching it how I want it, how I want that movement. Then personally, it's also the flow of the moon. One of my examples for the high school, one of my progressions was a dumbbell incline. We only have like three benches that incline. The other three benches are flat benches. So I was like, you know what? That's not going to work if that's a second movement. So I decided to just do a dumbbell Z press instead of a dumbbell incline, just because that might not be the textbook progression, but of the flow movement. You don't need benches for dumbbell Z press. You just need two dumbbells and sit on your butt. So it's also kind of the flow of the room and kind of knowing what I can progress them into and to be able to keep that flow and keep that time. Because like I said, I'm only 38 minutes in the weight room, or if we're out in the gym, 38 minutes. So I got to kind of keep it moving for whatever. I can't really explain that much without wasting that much time. Then to get good at a movement, if it's front squats, my personal belief is you got to front squat. It's that said principle of you got to do something to get good at it. So one of the big things I'm kind of debating in my head is, everybody says goblet squat before you front squat because that's a progression, in textbooks. People always say that. But when I came in, it was like, well, do I front squat them? Do I goblet squat them that first week? Like that first day, I end up just doing body weight to see them move. But then it's like we get in the weight room, I'm like, well, do I goblet squat them? Do I front squat them? And my thought was, well, I want to be really good at front squats. Let's get the bar on them and front squat them. That might not be everybody's way to go. Some people might be like, no, we goblet squat. You have to be able to goblet squat 80 pounds for 12 reps, 4 sets to get a bar for a front squat. But my belief is, to get good at something, you got to do it. So then sometimes I just like to throw it at them. The same thing that might not be the textbook way of thing to do. If it's like a single leg landing, single leg jump, whatever it is, I might just see it to see how they look at it and be like, well, that wasn't that bad. We can keep that. I like that. Or on the flip side of it, if it's some like single leg jump, single leg landing, it's like, oh my gosh, let's not do that again. So that's kind of my thought process of that, of changing the complex. I try to progress them, but at the same time, it's also sometimes of, well, let's see if they're ready, because I'm kind of having that logic. I don't know if you remember this, Mello, but when we at Pella, let's see, trying to think, I can't. It was the girls because we were trying to get the girls in the weight room, and I remember one of them was like, "Well, can we?" I don't know if she said front squat or back squat. She's like, "Well, can we whatever variation?" And my head process was like, "Well, no, because you've been inconsistent. We need to see you squat. We got a goblet squat, or whatever it is." And you were just like, "Yep, yep. Next time you come in the weight room, we're squatting." So I guess that's like, because if it was just me and I said, "Well, no, we got to follow this," guess what? She's not coming to the weight room. So it's also the difference of knowing the situation and knowing what you are able to teach, because we're confident enough where we had that. I'm sure she squatted decently well because both of us were there to coach her. So I'm sure she squatted depth. She might have not had that much load, but yeah, she might have did the Marshall Bennett squats, but
Oh,
There it
um,
is. Just waiting for that one.
but you know what I mean? It's just like having that knowledge of that stuff, what's not in the textbooks, of knowing that coaching, you know. And like I said, I'm giving you props. This is probably the first time I've ever done this in my life. I actually learned something from you. So, and that was like the start of it. It was like, well, not everything has to be, well, I know you don't like this progression, but it doesn't have to be dumbbell bench to push ups to whatever, or it doesn't have to be push ups, eccentric push ups to push ups to dumbbell bench to bench. Each person's different. And that's kind of how I do get good at the movement. You got to do the movement. Sometimes I just throw my athletes into the fire and it's like, see how they do.
Touching
So
on
that's what
that, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say something because I've heard it like way too much when people try to say that they have to push up before they can bench and you have
yeah,
to be able
Mello.
to do push-ups. And it's like, that's just so ass backwards. Like, it
I
doesn't make
hate that.
sense. Because if you
Does
can't
not
handle
make
a
sense
push-up,
to
you may
me.
be able to bench the bar and you're still going
Yeah.
to get some progression out of that and then
And some
progress
bigger
into
guys who can
push-ups.
bench 225 can't do a push up. But for some reason, I couldn't get that through Mello's thick skull
and
when
you
he
still
was at
can't. They should fucking do push-ups before they bench press, before they do
stupid,
anything else. I still stand
stupid,
by that.
stupid.
I
Well, it's weird
disagree.
because you said you agreed with me at the end, but when we left,
It makes more sense when we're talking about like middle school kids when they're young and like, okay,
most
like
middle school kids can't do
physically,
push-ups. It's
physically they
even
may not be able to get
atrocious.
it done, and they can put
So
like dumbbells in their hands and start building muscle. It makes sense. But
So
when
if
we're
someone
talking
can
about high
bench the
school, we're talking
bar, but
high
they
school.
can't do a push-up, are you going to have them still try to do push-ups even if they're not good, rather than have a good movement with the barbell bench with like empty bar even? Are you going to
Yeah,
like
and
force
that's
them
how
into
you
do a
get
bad movement?
stronger. Increase the volume, get
Hey,
them stronger,
okay, you want
get
to talk about
volume under their
what gets
belt.
you stronger? So eccentrics get you stronger, right? So if I'm in a push-up plank and I eccentrically lower myself for 6 seconds, I'm not going to get stronger.
What's going to look
Leg
better?
drop.
That
No,
six
but
second eccentric push up, what he can't do, or two 30-pound dumbbells for 4 sets of 8 that build so much more volume over time, over each training session, over the weeks, over the months, over the years. What's going to build more volume? That or, well, you did one set of push ups, good, congrats.
all right. How would you progress people, Marsh? Let's get your take.
Push ups,
Are we
eccentric
doing
push ups, push
progressions? Are we
ups.
doing progressions, or are we talking about
Moving from
what
simple movements into more complex movements, when do you think, or when do you switch your athletes over from one to the next, to the next, to the next?
okay. So for me in the weight room, I like to do unilateral movements before I go bilateral to lower any asymmetries that we may have for our athletes. So I'm a little bit more blessed than you guys. I have a lot of technology at my hands. So we have force plates, we have force frames, we have Nord boards. So all that's going to tell me landing and jumping asymmetries is going to give me abduction of the hip asymmetries, and then the NordBoard gives us hamstring asymmetries. So I get to see everything clear as day. No ifs, ands, or buts, any uncertainties. I know they're asymmetries. So I definitely start with unilateral movements first, making sure that we lower those while maintaining, good control movements, like increasing their core strength, glute strength, all that kind of stuff. Um, then we'll move into the bilateral movements. I'm with Aaron. I do agree that I think front squats are really important. So I kind of focus on front squats probably more than back squats. We do hex bar, and we do, conventional deadlifts, sumo deadlifts too. A lot of rear foot elevated split squats initially to get started. But, you know, when we go to the turf or we go do like running and jumping, then my thought process is totally backwards. I will go bilateral before I go unilateral because they need to have a good structure of landing mechanisms, running mechanisms, stuff like that before we do anything unilateral, single leg, just because you need to understand how much your hips withstand everything opposed to letting your knees take it and all that. The big thing that I kind of get, how do I say this? If we're talking about middle school, high school, probably some collegiate athletes, there's certain progressions into complexes that I get into. But when we're talking about more elite athletes, then I want to see what they can do if I haven't worked with them before, so I can kind of move them along a little bit faster so we can get to the higher end tier complexes a lot faster just because they're more elite athletes. They can withstand more, they need to do more kind of things. I think everybody should do the basics, really freaking well. But with elite athletes, you're able to do a little bit more with them. You have a little bit more time, and stuff like that. So when it gets into the elites, it's a little bit more complex just because I'm trying to get somewhere a little bit faster, just so we can do more high quality work for the short period of time. Because if we're talking about, let's say, NFL, we'll have them for like 2.5 months right now until they get back into mini camp. Pre-COVID, take COVID out of this. You have 2.5 months before they're back into mini camp, and then you have another 2.5 months over the summer before they go back into fall ball and getting ready for the season. So, collegiate and high school, you guys know. I mean, we get them all year long, basically. If we're in Division One, you get 9 weeks off the year. Otherwise, you're basically with the strength coach the whole year, right? Um, Depending on what the coach wants to do in season, off season, and all that kind of stuff. But high school, you get a little bit more say, and they're what do you guys have breaks on, Aaron? Just summer? You guys get a couple weeks in the summers, a week in the
I'm
winter,
not. Probably just winter break, then
spring
like
break, summer break.
Thanksgiving break. Yeah, spring break depends if I'm here, if we'll have open. But then again, it's the kids who want to come in, who are in town. Then
Right,
summer, I'm not sure how fast we go. I'm sure we'll probably give them a week or 2 weeks off and get
right.
going. If I had to guess, I'd say a week, maybe
Yeah.
2 weeks. I don't know. We
So when I'm
over
looking at
summer.
this and like talking about different athletes with middle school, high school athletes, you probably have the most time with them. Then you get into college, you have a little bit less time, and then when you get to the elite level, you have a lot less time. So, in what, about 5 months, with an elite athlete, what can you do? And like opposed to like a high school athlete, if I have, we talked about it in the first podcast, I'm pretty linear most of the time when I do anything. So if I have a high school athlete and I know I'm going to have them for, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, whatever, then I can take my time in those complex progressions. I don't need to be like, okay, we need to go to the next thing fast. We need to get really better at this a lot faster, whatever. I do throw them to the fire a little bit, kind of like what Aaron was talking about. But for the most part, I wrote it down here when I'm looking at those things. I want to see really good control, really good strength. Okay, let's move up in weight. Let's move into a more complex movement, anything along those lines. And then on the reverse side of things, it's okay, there's not a lot of body control. Let's not change the weight. Let's try to master what we're doing with the weight. It could be body weight, or if we just started loading it just a little bit, we'll stay there to make sure that the movement is at the highest level. and let's say it's not, then we start figuring out what kind of regressions we could do. For the most part, I always start with rear foot elevated split squats, which is, a progression. It's a little bit harder stabilization wise and whatnot, but I can always regress from there. I could go just to normal split squats or whatever. That's why I like going to that first, because it's going to be really challenging for a lot of athletes that haven't done much, never done anything like that, or maybe pretty strong, but they're really strong bilaterally, where they can, back squat 400 pounds at their high school, but they can't do shit when they go into a single leg
I'm
snatch.
sure if they back squat 400 pounds, they can do pretty good single leg. I bet, but not the
You,
flip side
Probably.
though. Not the
you,
flip
you're
side
right.
though.
You're right.
No, I know.
Got really good control
No,
and squat
Aaron,
that.
if you can split squat 200 pounds for 1 rep on each leg, that means you can back squat 400 pounds with both legs.
No doubt.
That's what it means. Yeah.
So, anyways, we're not getting to that debate right now. And going back to running and jumping, my biggest progressions is for jumping. I want to get them to going into single leg jumps and lands as quick as possible. One thing that we used to do back in Iowa that I really, went away from, and I don't know why. And sometimes I catch myself and I'm like, why haven't I done any, snap downs or anything like that? With especially the younger populations, I think can really understand like the landing mechanisms and like their body posture and how they should be when they land. That's something that I've been kind of tinkering with as of late, trying to bring it back into the program as much as I can. But um, even like the single leg snap downs and stuff like that. But trying to get them into a single leg jump over hurdles, and laterally, I really want them to do what I call lateral medial jumps. So they jump laterally, so right leg to right leg, going lateral to the lateral side, or medially, if we went right leg to right leg, I'm jumping towards the center of my line. So your knee's trying to track into a valgus state, and you're trying to adjust and make sure that doesn't happen. That's probably my biggest progression I try to get to, as quote unquote as fast as I can. But again, making sure that it's controlled, good, high quality movements before we get there. Um, and then running and stuff like that, there's not a lot of like single leg stuff I probably do. I mean, I should probably expand my knowledge on that a little bit more, but I just really teach them how to run and how to move, and then start progressing in, or start moving into more complex with resisted stuff. And then at the end of all that, the number one thing I'm always going to do is deceleration, making sure that they know and understand how to stop under control and as fast as possible, and really control their body. So, what up, Sam? What do you got?
No, wait, I got a question for you, Marshall. I'm sure Sam is intrigued. You kept saying complex stuff. I'm at the high school setting, so I don't really know what complex stuff is anymore. Sam was at Walford, so his athletes weren't just a high level like you. So I'm question is what's some complex stuff you do with your elite athletes? You say
When I say more complex, I'm not saying like something ridiculous that you guys don't have your hands on. But if we're talking about elite, then probably more velocity based training. Still with front squats, back squats, with safety squat bars. We can do split squat assisted.
Kind of just different variations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, nothing like,
Keeping the basic movement pattern, but different variations to it.
yeah, I'm not doing anything, I'm not breaking any molds. I'm doing all the basic things, just really freaking well or really freaking fast, and just moving on along the spectrum, man. Nothing special on this end.
since you got the velocity, I'm gonna throw this out and let me see what you say. I would go as far to say as if I were to have the money to get velocity, I would have that for all my athletes, no matter obviously not middle school, but like for all my athletes at the high school. I would love that just for the intent purposes of them having that instant feedback. What do you guys think about that? Obviously, if I had the money, yes.
It's
Just
a double-edged
solely
sword.
on that intent.
It can be a
See
double-edged
that?
sword. You can have that intent, but then they may try to go too fast too soon, and something breaks down, and then you're back to square one. And then
True,
you just
true,
gotta
true.
take it away and work back into it and try to get that like if someone has really solid squat technique or something like that, and I want to get them to have a little bit more intent, a little bit more intensity on that fast acceleration through the bar, maybe I'll like start with a stopwatch or something. I'll be like, hey, I'm gonna time you on this set. But gotta, make sure that they understand you gotta reset between each rep. You gotta make sure that each rep is still solid technique wise, everything like that before they actually move into for real volume base.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of the intent aspect of things. I mean, honestly, I try to keep the VBT just towards the elite athletes. I haven't really used a lot of it with high school athletes unless they are really good, proficient lifters or anything along those lines. Because, I mean, with elite athletes, I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, I've seen it both ways where, you keep lightweight and they're just kind of getting them in, lifting them, running them, and setting them on their way, making sure they're set and good to go. But I'm still in the sense of a strength coach, and like I want these guys to be as strong as possible, as fast as possible. So I still want them to lift heavy ass weight as fast as they can, depending on like what we're doing on the spectrum. Like if we're doing speed strength or if we're doing strength speed, I want them to have, when we're doing, speed strength, then obviously, yeah, the intent is like 100% what I want, because I don't care about how much weight we have on there. I just want it to be moving as fast as possible every single time. Opposed to the other side, it's like, okay, let's load it up, but let's stay between these ranges the whole time, right? So, I mean, honestly, you guys should be looking in the company that I got into. We haven't paid anything for it, and it's a lot like Tendo units, where it has like the string that hooks up to your bar, and these ones come with like a super strong magnetic one that you just snap it to the bar and it stays on for dear life. But Rep One is the one that we looked into, and I saw it after what's her name at Luther got them.
Allie.
Allie did before she left, but she got him. I reached out to her, asked her what she thought, and then I reached out to the company just because, now that I'm like in a larger company that I'm working with, they just have a bigger, I don't know, expansion with technology. They can kind of really talk to companies and incubate what they have, so we can kind of shoot footage and send it back to them and they can utilize it. So they give us 4 units for free, fully decked out with like those magnetic things. It can come with a barbell strap and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I really like the equipment. It gives you a really good reading. Their software is pretty easy to work with, and it's kind of integrated in their own way, kind of like a team builder, where it isn't as good as team builder in the sense of like creating all your exercises. You would have to build that out within it, and then over time it gets better. Like if you initially just got team builder, you would have to make all the exercises and whatnot. But it's a really good technology to have, honestly.
Fair enough.
Well,
So when
maybe look into these $400 units, you might be able to afford a couple.
Yeah, Aaron.
I wasn't paying attention to anything that Marshall says. I'm still infuriated about that. Yeah, he's really strong single leg, so that means he's really strong bilateral.
That's not what I said. I said just because he's strong bilaterally doesn't mean he's good single leg. We can talk about that
anyway.
Still wasn't paying attention. Still was not paying attention.
Anyway, I try to break up my kind of progression from simple to complex in a few different ways, where it's more of building on weak points versus movement quality versus things that we're already solid on. Because if you're going to build up movement quality, let's just say, I mean, an example that I give is one scenario that I dealt with a while back. It was like one sport coach wanted me to was really pushing for me to start cleaning with the team and start cleaning like heavy, because they believed that it was a 1-to-1 transfer from cleans into their sport. And I disagreed, because everything we do in the weight room is general. But I wasn't sure. It was a temporary position, so it depends on how long you're going to be there, how many hours you're going to be with the athletes. Where I wasn't sure how long I was going to be there. I might have been there a year, might have been there 2 years, something like that. But I felt like if I had I could teach them the movement, but I didn't know if I was ever really going to get them actually into fully like cleaning or going past like technique, because I wasn't really going to be there uh, super long, right? So I figured we're going to have a secondary squat day. We were the where I was at, we were really big on box squatting. So our first, because it was easy to kind of get a general layout. Everyone was squatting basically the same way. It was pretty uniform all the way around. We were able to come up with basically a list of cues to be able to give the kids and be able to put them in the position we wanted them to be in. And then once they got solid at that, we were able to take the box away, and they were basically squatting the exact same way as they were with the box when we took it out. So I thought, why add more complex movements like the clean when I can add that second squat day? They're going to get better at the squat because they're just getting more reps and more experience with it. They're going to get stronger, which is going to help them all the way around. And it's going to be safer, because doing a movement that you know versus doing a movement that you don't know and trying to load up that movement that you don't know is going to be more dangerous than sticking with what you know and getting even better at one movement, while you could also implement like lighter weights, stuff like that, to try to replicate sort of the adaptation that you're looking for. So that was the kind of battle that I was in, where it was more of like, well, if I teach these kids how to clean and I see them twice a week for like a semester, and maybe 3 times a week for a few months or something, and then they leave over the summer, maybe some kids have someone to clean, maybe some kids can't clean at all. It's like, so then they come back and we start from zero anyway. So I figured, they're going to be squatting over the summer. Everyone's going to have basically access, this is pre-COVID, where they're basically going to have access to somewhere where they can squat, and they can squat the way we taught them how to squat. So it made more sense to kind of downplay the clean in that situation and kind of build up the squat to be able to try to get that same stimulus as we would try to get with the clean. But with that, it was more of like, if we're trying to progress from simple to complex, it's more of like, you guys have both touched on it. It's athlete experience, like their training age, stuff like that. It's their movement quality. How is it already? If they have like flawless movement quality as is, you can probably throw someone into almost any different movement and they'll be fine. And then weak point training, where you can kind of take that a few different ways. You can take that as simple as like, oh, well, their glutes, they're not tight in the bottom of the squat, so we're going to work on glutes, hamstrings, posterior chain, so they can really stick and be solid in the bottom and get that whatever, that force through the ground to come back up. So it's more of just like, what are we targeting? What's our intent with this? And then if we hit that intent, maybe it's with that main movement that I kind of look back on to see if it's working. If that movement is working with the main movement that I'm looking at, then yeah, we can progress and make it a little bit tougher or a little bit more complex so that they can kind of build even further into that. And then on top of that, we're going to always hit like the things that we're always pretty solid at, where it's just building on things that you're already good at. I don't think you need to have as much volume in that area as you do with the weak points or with just basic movement quality work, and getting everything kind of just well-rounded for each athlete. So it's more of, how do you find that weak point? How do you look back and see if the weak point training is working? Is the movement quality in general going or improving? And so that's kind of how I progressed. And I've had some athletes where, like, I've had high schoolers where I thought they were completely ready to start cleaning, like going a little bit heavier. They were solid on their squats, like free squat, box squat, like they crushed it. So I was like, yeah, on our clean day, when everyone else was doing a little bit more technique, those guys or those girls, like those athletes, were loading up a little bit more weight and focusing more on that bar speed, getting into that velocity based training. So, because that was one old thing that I don't know where I got it from, but it was something, but it was like, I didn't want anyone to load up too much weight on a clean until they could squat about double body weight. And that's just an arbitrary number that I just thought of at one point, I think. I'm not sure where I got it from, but that was one of my criteria at the time where I was like, if you're not strong enough to clean, then why do it right away? We're going to stick with technique. But playing into that, some movements are going to be more just natural for athletes and some movements aren't, where you're going to have people with front squat with clean getting into that front rack position, the wrist mobility, their lats are tight, something like that. They're not going to be able to get into that front rack position that you want them to. And so you can put the Band-Aid on and have them using the straps to put their arms up, and that's okay. But if you're going to try to ultimately move into the clean, you can't really use the straps to get into that front rack position. So you're going to have to get into that position at some point. And so that's where maybe on our clean day, we would go into technique, then we'd go straight into front squat where they get some volume in that position, get some time in that position to get more comfortable, kind of work that the specific range of motion that we wanted to. And that's where I kind of go back to range of motion and mobility is always a touchy subject, because a lot of people think that more mobility is always good because you're always going to feel better with more mobility. And so you should just stretch more and stuff like that. And I've always.
Wait, don't answer. Mello, what's your best mobility exercise? I want to hear this before Sam goes.
Best mobility exercise for what exactly?
Whatever it is. If it's squat, clean, what do you think it is? What's your go-to?
Now it's probably distractions. It's like hip distractions, distractions.
Okay. Sam, go ahead and finish it. My thing is full range of motion of exercises.
Well, Sam. Yeah, I mean, and that depends. It depends on that. If we're going into a compound movement, squat, bench, stuff like that, of course, full range of motion is going to be key for the most part. But there's a point where you need to be able to train through that range of motion. Now, I'm saying, like, if you have someone who can bring their arm up to their shoulder and they can't reach overhead, and then you do mobility and now they can reach over their head, but you have this whole range of motion where they're weakened because they haven't trained through that range of motion. So they're weak here and then they're solid here. Right when they have to get into this position on the field, they're going to snap something and it's going to be really bad. So it's like, and I got this when I was at Minnesota. They would say, or Cal would say, like, you only want to be as mobile as you need to be to perform your sport. It helps you keep your elasticity. It helps you be a little bit more powerful and explosive. And so it's for athletes, absolutely only as mobile as you need to be to perform your sport. If we're going to just like sit around and static stretching is an okay cool down. And even for a cool down, it's not good. Like, it's just, I would rather have my athletes lay on the floor and take a nap than static stretch. Like, but mobility.
What would you rather do, Mello? What would you rather do? Hit him with that knowledge.
Mello, you look like you have something to say. Say it to my face.
Say it, Mello.
You would like static stretching. You're a big yogi.
I mean, I would have stretched them. I'm for sure still gonna stretch them at the end of it.
Why not belly breathe?
Because I've seen the benefits in the past.
What?
I don't have a document in front of me that's like, so and so said in this literature that this is why you should do static stretching. We used to do it after
just something you always did,
and we always did it, and it always worked for the guys. I think
there's just something you always did, so it works, right?
Would you be happy if a strength coach said that? That's all we've always done it like that? No, you wouldn't. You would have a fit. We expected better.
That's why mobility is. That's why I said mobility is a touchy subject, because some people have different thought processes. Where it's like, I think if you have extra range of motion that you don't need, you're wasting it because, and it's potential injury.
That's why he rolled his ankle. that one day at Iowa. He's
Doing
stretching
some
out his
carries.
ankle too much. Yeah, that's why he's
Wow,
hurt.
wow. Well, let me
Marshall, that's what we call mobility without stability.
help me
Yeah,
out here, guys. Explain to me more, Sam, what you mean by doing mobility through full ranges of motion.
I'm saying if you're going to be able to squat, like if you can squat ass to grass, good for you. You can strengthen the entire range of motion. You can build everything through the entire like movement. If you're going to stretch so that you can get to ass to grass, but you haven't ever done a movement where you're in that full squat position, if you ever have to get into that full squat position, you're not going to know what to do. Your body's not going to know what to do. You're going to flop. You're going to flounder. I don't know. Like, because imagine something like a position that you've never been in before. And then you stretch and do all this mobility just to get into that position. What are you going to do in that position? You're not strong there. What are you going to do? You're just you're going to sit there because you got to that range of motion. Like, good job, but it's not going to help you do anything. I want like active range of motion. And if you can increase the active range of motion through training with like basic primal movements and stuff like that with a squat, everyone should be able to squat ass to grass and be able to hold it. You should be able to do that. Do you always want to do that? No, not always. But it's like, because are you always going to do that in some sort of competition or in a sport? No, probably not, unless, specific positions and stuff like that. But if you're not going to be in that position, and if it's not going to really if it's only going to give you more range of motion and make you more mobile, then it's a waste. And that's why stag stretching is a waste of time.
I will say my go-to ankle stretch right now for my athletes is a front foot elevated split squat, body weight. Then we've been loading it. Just try and get that. I stole that on Instagram. Try and get the hamstring,
The Joey Burgos.
calf. Yeah.
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 I've been doing
Well, and
that.
that's the thing, because
it's really good. But I mean, like the big thing to me, I guess I just got confused because I thought you were meaning that
It's because you're old.
by squatting, you would improve the range of motion rather than.
Of course, if you squat full range of motion, that's improving your range of motion.
Improve your range of motion.
Like, let's say you're squatting and like your right ankle is caving in just a little bit when you squat. Like, obviously you have range of motion issues in your ankle that you need to improve because your body's always going to take the path of least resistance.
Or maybe your squat setup is
Sam,
off.
maybe
Marshall, maybe you're
Sam,
not.
You're the
maybe
athletic trainer here. You should be
talking.
If you're
maybe your ankle is rolling in because your squat setup isn't right, and you
There's-
need your coach to help you get into the right setup for your squat so that you can get into the correct range of motion to train for your sport.
Okay, well, let's say the coach did that and you still have poor range of motion. Like, you're going to have to improve that before you go squat.
If you can fix my athletes' ankles rolling in at the high school, come tell me, because I'm.
Well, that's what we did with our box squat at Wofford. We would set the box a little bit higher than parallel, which it would be at their or towards their end range of motion for the squat, where then things would start to break down for our criteria. Maybe their back is getting loose. Maybe they're just plopping down on the box and it's not really like a good movement quality. We're going to improve that movement quality little by little by slowly decreasing that box height, so that once they get to about parallel or wherever they need to be for their further depth, then we're good. We don't need to change the box height after that. And then when we take the box out, it's going to look exactly the same because they have so many reps and so much time in that range of motion. And they've been working and training to strengthen themselves through that range of motion. So it's like if you're having mechanical issues and technical issues during a movement, you can even just make it more simple by decreasing the range of motion first and then working back into it progressively. So it's less. It's not exactly like simple to complex, but it's like it is more complex that you're trying to change how your body is acting in a certain range of motion. And so if you're going to sit on the floor and touch your toes for half an hour after every lift, I don't know what you're trying to do with that. Like, your hammies are tight? Probably not.
RPR.
A tight
what
muscle
you
is a
need.
strong muscle. A tight muscle is an explosive and powerful muscle.
This is RPR, baby.
If your hamstrings are bothering you, if your lower back is bothering you, it's not your hamstrings. It's probably something's weak. I've never had a problem that is like that, where it's like, you guys know, because you've both had athletes probably that have said, oh, my back is tight or my hamstrings are tight. Well, it turns out that may be the weak area, and you need to improve that, because maybe other muscles are pulling on it, making it feel tight. Where if that muscle is strong enough, it's going to be able to keep its position better. And so when you get into a range of motion where that's going to be stressed, that muscle isn't going to just give up because other muscles are pulling on it, or you're going through a range of motion where it's getting stretched more. It's going to be able to keep that position because it's a stronger muscle. That was one of the things that I've had to deal with a few times, where I'm like, someone says, oh, my hamstrings are tight, and I have them go do the stability ball leg curls or something, and they hop up and they're like, oh, well, I mean, it feels less tight. It doesn't feel as tight or anything. And it's like, yeah, because you're actually using your hamstrings. You're actually like building up that strength. So now your hamstrings aren't just going to get like torn apart when you get into the range of motion that pisses it off. It's actually going to stay together and be strong and a little bit safer.
So Sam, not to backtrack, but would you on the box squats go from like 18 inches to 15 inches to 12 inches to work on that depth and work on that full range of motion? Or would it be you guys worked to a certain amount and then you took the box away and then they did full squats?
It wasn't a full squat. I don't think we ever got to a full squat. We trying to think, because we had inches set up because of each box was however tall or something. I don't remember exactly. And then we had to have like plates, the different weights of plates that we kind of stacked up under them to be able to kind of judge it. And then once they were solid in that range of motion, we pulled it out. But once they got down to, I mean, it wasn't absolutely ass to grass, but you don't absolutely need ass to grass, because that may be extra range of motion. And if you're stronger in that extra range of motion, it's kind of playing into, I don't know, for me at least, it kind of plays into kind of what Louis says. If you're strong in the wrong movement, then no one cares and it doesn't do anything for you. I think that can also apply to ranges of motion. You know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah, if I can do dumbbell curls with my arm behind my back and pull it all the way up to my neck, then sure. But what am I doing? I'm getting stronger in that range of motion, but I'm not doing anything that would help.
What do you think about that, Mello? You do some bicep curls?
You know, I hit some bicep curls the other day. You know, it was just hitting my weak points after bench. You know how that goes, you know?
Well, your weak point is your bench, buddy.
Not everybody can bench press 500 pounds like you, all right? So CTFO.
What does that mean?
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in this week to Strength and Knowledge Podcast. I hope you guys liked it. Please comment. Let us know what you guys think. And thank you guys for tuning in this week.